The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab 827 for Monday, August 3rd, 2020. Welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found. We try to answer them. We try to enhance everyone's knowledge. We share our own tips. We share our own cool stuff found. The goal is for each and every one of us to earn? Well, you can earn them, but you can also just learn 5 new things each and every time we get together. Sponsors for this episode include PlushCare.com/MGG, a new one. TextExpander.com/podcast and Linode.com/MGG. And I've got a different idea about how to tell you about Linode today. So even if you've heard it before, listen again. Trust me. Go with me on this. We'll talk about all those later in the show. That's what I mean. For now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun.
John F. Braun, let's... we get all kinds of different questions in, things sort of pile up. We've got a bunch of geek challenges today, so I want to go and dive in a little bit on some things. It might get a little geeky. We do have some quick tips to start with, though, because we love the quick tips and we can't really get away from those. We can't let ourselves get away from those. But yeah, then let's see where this goes if we give ourselves the opportunity to have a little jam session. So, but we'll start with our favorite quick tips. Roger writes in with, he says, I think this showed up in iOS 13. If it's in earlier versions, I never knew it. If you do a screenshot and do nothing else, the picture gets saved in Photos, as usual. I recently noticed that if you tap on the screenshot photo, that goes to the bottom left corner. Within about 5 seconds, the screenshot photo fills the screen and you get several options. One option allows you to make edits and markups to the screenshot photo. Another option allows you to save the picture to somewhere other than to Photos. Finally, you can share the screenshot directly without having to open Photos and then share it from within Photos. If you share it this way, the screenshot photo is not saved in Photos, so you don't have to go back later and delete it if you prefer not to save the screenshot long term. Yeah, absolutely. I do this all the time. And you're right. I believe you're right that iOS 13 is where this first showed up. This also is true on the Mac if you use the new screenshot functionality. So Command-Shift-3 and Command-Shift-4 are still there. And now there's Command-Shift-5 in Catalina. And Catalina, that same little thing happens. It's not in the lower left, it's in the lower right. And when it gets down there, you can either leave it alone, and if you do, it'll save it to your screenshot's destination, wherever that may be. Or if you click on it, you get an edit window and you can do all those things and then save it or not save it, but you can share directly from there. So, yeah, it's pretty. They've added a lot. I agree. Anything to add there, Mr. Braun?
I don't know. Every now and then, I don't know. I don't get the timing right, but
okay. When
I try to take a screenshot on my phone, sometimes I'll land on the shut down 911 screen. Oh, you're still Team Home button on your phone, right? Right. And
okay.
So the way to take the screenshot, I think, so maybe I'm just getting the timing wrong. You hold down the power button and then you hit the home button.
Nice.
Screenshot.
What's going on out there? You've got some kind of...
Somebody's getting their lawn done.
Oh, beautiful. There you go. Cool. Fun. Yeah. All right. We will let John's lawn get done while McKay takes us through the next quick tip, if I can get this right. So.
Hi, John and Dave. McKay here. It's been a few years since I've had something to contribute to the show, but I think this cool stuff found that doubles as a tech mystery will be interesting to some viewers. For the past year or more, I've noticed that my mom's MacBook Air has looked off, very subtly off. When using the Finder, I noticed that the gray alternating pattern in list view was very washed out and almost impossible to differentiate. However, I could get it to return if I placed another window over the Finder, and in the shadowed region from the drop shadow, I could see the alternating bars. When using Reddit, the vertical gray bars that link a comment to a child comment were also invisible, and a myriad other elements in the UI just looked as if they had less contrast. I thought perhaps her display on the MacBook was faulty, but this behavior persisted on her Apple Cinema display and on a third-party display that I had. But this behavior did not persist on a fresh test account on the same machine.
Aha.
My Google foo proved inadequate to solve this issue, as when I searched for this problem, all of the results pointed to display calibration, and display calibration did not solve this issue. However, the other day I got the urge to try again and looked around the accessibility features, and I found the control to fix her strange washed out display. In System Preferences, Accessibility, and Display, the slider labeled Display Contrast was set one notch to the right. Moving this back to the normal position made her display look normal. I've included screenshots to show the differences between normal and not normal.
No, that's great. Thank you, Makay. What a great little quick tip. You know, I was just on TDO with Kelly this week, John, talking about all the things that you can find in display preferences to enhance your system, even if you don't have a physical need for a lot of the things that are there. There are things there that make a lot of sense for many of us to use. And also, it's a place where you can change things in a way that you might not want to. So I found that really interesting that his screenshots were not including it makes sense, but the screen with I like that test of doing a screenshot and seeing, does it have the problem? Because that tells you if it's a physical problem with the monitor, or is the system somehow artificially doing things? And, this was great. I love it. I love the whole thing. Great little quick tip, but also great sleuthing, great troubleshooting. So thanks for sending that in, Makay. Very, very cool. Any thoughts on that, Mr. Braun?
No, sometimes I wonder how that got set.
Well, that's the question, right? Is yep. Did it get set? Yeah, right. Who did that? Yeah, and obviously we will never know unless it happens again, right? Those sort of mysteries. I agree. It would be good to know, but sometimes there's no way to know. So, all right, shall we go to Olga here, John, and dig into some of these geek challenges that we've been piling up?
This is kind of handy. Maybe you could have seen this. So on accessibility, there's a checkbox where you can say show status in menu bar, and then if you click on that, it'll show. Yeah, I don't think it shows the contrast setting, though.
Interesting. No. Okay. Wow.
But it shows other things that are set. So actually,
I see.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine, and yeah, everything's off, which is the way I want it. So.
Right. That's really interesting. I never realized that. Yeah, it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't list everything. But cursor, magnification, invert colors, flash screen, mouse keys, alternate pointer actions. Okay, so it can show you some of these. That's handy. I like it. That's good. Good. Cool. All right. I'll take us to Olga here, John. And Olga says, maybe this one's easy, but I don't think any of these are, to be perfectly honest. The sound on my iMac became hard to hear. The volume control is at max. My hearing is fine. The output is set to the internal speakers. The volume is consistently low in all apps. I hope that it's not a hardware problem, as I am out of warranty. Any thoughts? Okay. So, Geek Challenges here. So we will be doing this. Of course, anybody in our chat rooms at live.macgeekgab.com, while we're recording this, will hopefully chime in throughout any of these, as you always do. So thank you. But the thoughts that come to mind for me on this one, John, are first is to check the headphone port and make sure you don't accidentally have headphones plugged in. With the volume cranked, you off, depending on your headphones and the impedance and how loud they are, you might be able to hear sound out of them if they're like open ear headphones or something laying on the desk near the iMac. I've seen this before, and it's like, why is it so low? Oh, right, because it's not actually coming out of the speakers. So confirming that it's coming out of the speakers and not somewhere else is a good first step. It sounds like you've probably done that, but, trust me when I say I've seen this. So that would be step one. Step two, which you've definitely done, is to open the sound preference pane and make sure that your device for output is truly set to the thing that you think it's set to and that your volume is right. The next thing I would do is launch Audio MIDI Setup. It's in the Applications Utilities folder, I believe, but you can also just launch it by spotlighting for Audio Space MIDI, and then you'll see Audio MIDI Setup and just launch that. Go there, click on your speakers, and again here, make sure that the volume level there is correct. Another thing to test and even adjust in Audio MIDI Setup is to adjust the I'm pulling it up here on my machine, and hopefully I don't make a stupid mistake and ruin our podcast audio. So everybody let me know if John, especially you, let me know if I go weird. But change the format from whatever format you have to another sample size, like, change it from 44.1 to 48K and then back. I leave mine set at 44.1. A lot of people leave theirs set at 48. But change it. Just make a change so that the system kind of has to reinitialize the audio drivers. But also check the sliders there, because you will have different sliders for stereo here. And it's entirely possible that even though your master volume is all the way up, these may not be. So this really could be a place to find that for you. If that doesn't work, do an SMC reset, and we'll put a link in the show notes for that. Any thoughts, John? I mean, I've got some more, but we're just riffing here. So,
I kind of like the next one you have there.
Go ahead, take it.
Maybe it.
Yeah.
Well, another way to diagnose a problem is if you boot into safe mode, that will boot with a core set of Apple extensions and not third-party. So
right.
I would try safe mode, and if the volume is normal there, then it's something that, though I can't imagine what, but some sound extension is getting in the way. Yeah,
right. Yes, some third-party thing. There's a lot of apps out there. Most of them are reliable, but all of them can cause issues. We've mentioned SoundSource. I mean, they all intentionally make changes. They sort of insert themselves into the stream to enhance or allow you different controls over the audio. So something like SoundSource or like Boom, another one, like any of these things that are built to enhance the sound might be getting in the way. And yeah, that safe mode would do that. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else on this one, but I think we've hit all our things. Hopefully Audio MIDI Setup and or safe mode kind of gets you past this. It sounds like, I mean, I know that this may not be Olga's issue, but in general, there's, and you won't see this on an iMac, which is why it's definitely not Olga's issue. But if you're using an external display, a lot of times, if it's an HDMI display, they will have audio that you're sending as well. And sometimes by default, it just grabs that as the sound output device. And a lot of the speakers and displays like that are terrible. And even at full volume just sound like they're not. So again, that you would see that once you open sound preference pane and sort of chose, unless you've got something like SoundSource running, right? Because SoundSource, you can set your system volume in sound preference pane, but then you can set individual apps to go to different devices, which is cool. But again, with great power and great flexibility comes great responsibility. So, yeah.
I mean, the other thing you could look, so I was looking here and I do have some things. So, audio components can live in two different places.
Okay.
I'm looking right now. So either library, so top level library audio, within there's actually a plugins folder, and I have some things in there. So one thing I see, so for example, I have, and I probably should get rid of this, Flip for Mac WMA import.
Yeah.
It's left over from, oh yeah, look at that, 2013. So, oh, there's a sound component I can probably get rid of.
See, this extends or echoes back to last week, right? We're adding to the case for the nuke and pave, right? By finding all of these things that are like,
right.
Yeah, that's there, but not, yeah.
Yeah, and then your home directory library also has an audio folder, so that stuff's in 2 different places.
Yep.
So,
sure.
So you want to peek there and see if there's any old cruft.
Cool. Will you put those folders in the show notes just so we can link people to them? Just type them out and we'll format them nice and make them look like yep. special code or whatever. Cool. All right. Let's go to Chip here. Thanks, Olga. So it's a good, fun little one. All right. So Chip asks, he says, I live in rural North Carolina and the only wired internet service which is available is AT&T DSL. I get 6 megabits per second down, 200 kilobits per second up. And that's when it's working. AT&T won't invest in VDSL or any other service. Indeed, rumor is they want out of copper entirely, but are unwilling to run fiber or cable to our rural development of about 50 homes and lots. There is coax cable served by a company in an immediately adjacent area, but they won't run service to us because the ROI would not be up to their goals. Utilities are buried, so trenching would be expensive. They will magnanimously do so if we, as a community, come up with the $300,000 to $400,000. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. He says satellite works, but as you probably know, they give you 25 megabits down until you hit their caps, which are 20 to 30 gigs. He says right now I use about 100 gigs per month. After that, they slow you down to 1 megabit per second. You can't stream anything at 1 megabit. I might as well stick with AT&T. I've heard of the Rural Broadband Initiative, but it's grossly underfunded, and it seems you need political pull to get their attention. I build websites for my friends, so you can imagine how this is killing me. Any ideas? Yeah, so this is, again, another geek challenge. Would a cell connection work? How is the cell service in your area? And if you had a fixed place device, and it could just be a phone that's, tethered via USB to the right router that then shares with your house, like that might work. And that essentially is what 5G will bring to our homes, is something similar to that. It is packaged a little more nicely. And of course, if you've got 5G in your area, then that's yet another thing to consider. So that would be the first thing I would look at, because you get to control your own destiny with that, sort of. I mean, you're still at the mercy of the people that are providing the cell service, but it gets you there. The other one that came to my mind as I was kind of musing through this is, what about a point-to-point Wi-Fi connection? Either a service, because there are some, especially in rural areas, there are point-to-point Wi-Fi services, and Wi-Fi can go miles if it's focused, right? And so that might get you there. And if there's not a service, do you have a friend in the adjacent development who would be willing to share their bandwidth with you in exchange for sharing perhaps the cost of that bandwidth from the cable company? Because if you can get a point-to-point connection between them, you can build a point-to-point connection relatively inexpensively. I think you're looking at, $500 or less would get you the dish antennas that you would need to aim at each other. And you can pass a lot of data across that. Again, you need point to point though. So that's the key. You need line of sight for the most part. But again, another, thing, if you've got a friend over there, maybe you can strike a deal and have some, nerdy fun while you're doing it. So I don't know. Those are the things that popped into my head, John. What do you got on this one?
Yeah, actually the, hey, it's the politician angle could be worthwhile. I'll tell a short story here. We have a local system called Nextdoor.
Okay.
And, where you can have community chats. And a lot of people complain about our cable service, which is Optimum Online. I'm happy with them, but a lot of people are not, and they report, insufficient speed and reliability issues. And I think some of it is self-inflicted, but some is not.
Okay.
Remember, I had them come out here, but so we actually had it brought to enough people wrote our select woman that she actually commissioned a survey and then, relayed the results to Cablevision or, the companies that offer service here, saying, hey, with more people home, my constituents are complaining about reliability, and hey, can you do something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right now you can kind of lean into that more people at home thing too. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that happened, another person told the story. So they actually got in touch with the FCC about the reliability, and it took that to get them to call this person back and fix their setup, which they did. So,
yeah. Well, call the.
And as far as that rural, broadband initiative, get in touch with your congressperson and say, hey, I want a piece of that. So you can get us some of that dough. Because I think the dough's been allocated to do it. It's just, you got to try to get somebody's attention.
You got to get somebody's attention to get there. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. In our chat room, Brian Monroe and Eric DSA, Eric says fixed wireless is the term that AT&T uses to call their home cell scenario. So that's, one option out there. And Brian Monroe says fixed wireless can be cellular, or it could be some microwave tech that he's used before. So there might be options out there. And Fixed on 66 in the chat room says, by line of sight for point-to-point Wi-Fi, would a tree branch or two be an issue? The answer is it very well can. Yeah. I years ago told the story of my uncle who wanted to get Wi-Fi simply across the street to the cottage that he had bought and didn't want to pay whoever it was, the provider, for yet another home to connect. So he just, he did point to point. And once every few years, he had to, get up on a ladder and cut, a hole in the branches, essentially, so that the line of sight could shoot through. Because when the leaves came in the spring, the connection sort of quality went down. So, yeah. So, yes, line of sight truly means line of sight with this stuff, at least for any sort of reliable connection. Yeah. So, cool. All right. Thanks. Fun. See, I knew we would be having fun if we took a little more relaxed, geeky approach at this one. We won't do this every week, but I'm liking this. Let's go to Craig, John. And Craig asks, he says, I have an interesting mystery. I just recently discovered that my CPUs on a quad-core iMac 2015 Retina are mysteriously heating up each night for a momentary spike. This seems to be a recent thing, as I review iStat Menu's CPU temp charts at least once a month, and this is new in the last month or so. Okay, so he knows what normal looks like. This is new, not normal. It's the new normal, I guess. Below, he sent a screenshot showing the pattern, and sure enough, over a 7-day period, every night, the CPU temperature is heating up, and it seems to be almost exactly at 11 p.m. his time, maybe 3 to 5 minutes on either side. He says, to his knowledge, no application or utility is set to run on the system at this time frame. Nothing that he has intentionally set up anyway. He says, while not seeing any app crashes or system crashes due to this problem just yet, I'm concerned that something minor could worsen or the spikes could become more frequent and or longer in duration. Some relevant info. The internal hard drive was replaced with a 1 terabyte SSD over 6 months ago. Performance and stability has been excellent ever since that. He's running the latest release build of Catalina. He says, I stay logged in 24/7, and his is the only account used on the system. Automatic updates are disabled. A dual drive SSD solution from OWC is continuously connected to the system via USB 3. It's AC powered, not bus powered. It's populated with a couple of 1 terabyte SSDs and are used as separate drives. One of them is used as needed for projects. The other is a carbon copy clone updated daily. Aha. Time machine backups to my Synology NAS launch at 8 p.m. and always complete before 10 p.m., including verification. Carbon Copy Cloner is set to run every day at 5 a.m. Backblaze latest version running continuously. Native macOS mail client is used for personal email, which is generally left running 24/7, and Office 365 is on, but auto updates are off. Okay, so, and I'm going to read through a list of always on third-party apps just so that we kind of have it. Memory Clean 2, Fantastical 3, Card Hop, Bartender, Sound Source, iStat Menus, SSD Reporter, Sketch, Parallel Tools, Clipboard. Okay, so other than observing what processes are running on the system around 11 p.m., which may in and of itself change the state, of course, right? Schrodinger's system, right? Where and what are the best built-in macOS logs to review evidence of what might be the root cause of this anomaly? So the first thing I would do is start looking at not just your CPU temperature logs, but your CPU usage graphs for that same period in time. Is it heating up because the CPU is being used, which is a very reasonable presumption, but we don't want to make any presumptions, right? We want to make sure that, yes, the CPU is actually being used. Okay, now we know where to look, because if the CPU is not being used and the temperature is spiking anyway, that's a whole different set of things to look at. But presuming that we confirm that the CPU is spiking, then obviously, yeah, like you said, start looking at what processes are running. I would do this via, if you have another device or another Mac especially, I would turn on SSH on the Mac in question, which is in System Preferences, Sharing, Remote Management, I believe is the right one, right? No, sorry, Remote Login. So go to System Preferences, Sharing, Remote Login. And then right there, once you turn it on, it'll say to log into this computer remotely, type. And then it'll tell you SSH space, your username at your Mac's IP address. All you need is that. Go to another Mac, open the terminal, type that in. Now you have, and then it'll ask you for your password, unless you've set up some other remote login and you're way ahead of us anyway. Once you're in, now you're logged into that other Mac, but you haven't woken up the screen. Yes, you've woken up the Mac, but in order to observe, this is, you're right. Schrodinger's principles apply here because we could mess this up. But this is what I would do. And then I would run the top command. And because top is essentially the terminal version of Activity Monitor. Really, I think it's probably the other way around because top has existed long before macOS. But anyway, you're going to run top, which is essentially Activity Monitor from the terminal. And I will put a version of the top command that I like to run. I would do top space -u, which sorts by CPU usage. So you're seeing at the top of the list the thing that's using the most CPU. And then space -S4, which tells it to update, to refresh the view every 4 seconds. Hopefully that will identify the problem, or at least identify, what's running. It takes quite a bit for a Mac to, it's not just a quick launch of a process that's going to heat the CPU. It needs to be doing something, assuming it's the CPU, it needs to be doing something for a little while before the temp will raise and then the fans spin up and, all of those sort of cascade of things that happen. But you're going to see something, chewing CPU for 4 seconds. You're not going to miss it in that 4-second period there. You're going to see something happening for sure if it's the CPU. So I don't know. That's where I'm starting with this, John. I've got some other ideas, but what do you think?
The mention of time machine, it seems the time machine backup is close to the point where his CPU spikes. So
it's
I'm wondering,
hours before, right?
Well, he says that it occurs at 11 o'clock, and he says the backup's usually complete by 10. I've had some cases, especially, so I leave this machine asleep,
okay,
but I have power nap activated. And one thing it'll do is do a time machine backup when I schedule it.
Right.
But it doesn't always do it when I schedule it with Time Machine Editor, so could be Time Machine running over on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just stay up until 11 and.
Yeah, but if he's interacting with the machine, like Time Machine might, right? Like, so that's why. But yeah, you got to stay up. You're almost. I mean, could you look at log files? Yes. If you launch console on your Mac, I always do this from the terminal, so I'm always a little bit at a loss here. But if you launch console and look at log reports, system log, that's going to show you with timestamps. And I believe system log converts them to your local time zone, which is awesome. So you're not having to do that math. You can scroll back. I mean, there's a lot per minute here, but system log would be yet another thing to look at there for sure. And see what you get.
Okay.
But I don't know. Yeah. It's you're heading down the right path, but yeah, make sure it's the CPU usage that's causing that and not. I mean, I guess there are other things, like if there's a hardware problem, the CPU would heat up. That the timing of that seems far too consistent for this to be a hardware issue, though. SMC is I know we mentioned that in the last one too, but SMC, if you're fans or you've got like weird problems, again, this is a little too consistent for this, but if you sort of exhaust everything else, try the SMC reset. It doesn't hurt unless you've got a major problem. But even then, I'm not sure that it hurts. So yeah, interesting. It's fun. I like this. We definitely have to do this more often. This is fun. Okay, let's go to Chris, shall we, John? Chris says. In an earlier episode, there was discussion about using a MacBook Pro as a desktop computer and battery best use. I don't recall if there was an end to that discussion about people using the MacBook Pro as a desktop and best battery use. Since my MacBook Pro is in constant desktop mode, never unplugged or moved, what is the best battery use in this setup? Do I take it through a cycle, a charge and discharge periodically? And if so, how often? Okay, so I'm not sure what model MacBook Pro we're talking about, but one that I think I'm going to be conservative and say in the last 5 years. I think it's more like the last 7 years, but certainly anything released in the last 5 years, Apple has done some things to address this. First, they're building the hardware to be smarter about battery management. And then more recently, macOS is being smarter about battery management too. And the end result is that you can be a lot more irresponsible, and I'll use air quotes for irresponsible, about you and just leave your MacBook plugged in. And generally speaking, the battery will survive and live a long life. And what Apple does is make sure that it's not actually charging all the time. They're doing this with our iPhones now too, with predictive stuff so that they can kind of figure out, all right, what's happening here, what generally happens. When should I hit the last bit of the charge? How far should I let it slip down? Those sorts of things. But if you know that you're going to be like, the worst thing for a battery is to sit at full charge and just have, a slow trickle come in to sort of maintain that full charge. That is something that we've seen will kill the life of the useful life of a battery, because the capacity of it, the effective capacity of it will drop precipitously over time. But if you're using your battery and I'll use Adam Christensen's phrase because I love it. If you're keeping the electrons flowing either in or out, that's really good for your battery. And John, I think you were the first one that showed us that can even increase the battery's effective life, right? So, but Apple's doing a pretty good job with that. But if you're leaving it on your desk and you know that this is what you're doing to it, I would be a little more intentional and doing things, on a regular basis, like what you said with, let it discharge all the way. If you know you're going to be at your desk all day, unplug it, let it go all the way down to nothing, then plug it back in and let it come all the way back up, like those sorts of things. But also, if you mimic what someone would be doing if they were bouncing from coffee shop to coffee shop every day or classroom to classroom, because those are the environments where things have gone really well for people, where you just, okay, I'll plug it in for a couple hours and I'll unplug it for a couple hours. I'll plug it in for a couple hours and I'll unplug it. And then maybe tonight I'll leave it off and then tomorrow I'll plug it back in. You could even come up with a schedule and do the same thing every week, every day of the week. And that would, probably work out. So, but there's an app that'll help you with some of that called Fruit Juice. And it's not as necessary for most people these days. But for your scenario, I would use Fruit Juice because it's going to remind you, hey, you haven't done this in a while. Go ahead and do it. So I don't know. So you use a laptop as your main machine far more than me. I think you use your laptop as your main machine, right, John?
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think?
What I was looking around and I found just looking for articles about this very thing.
Sure.
And the thing that I proved to myself, and I found one article, and their advice was, don't do the full. You don't want to let it drop all the way down and then charge it all the way up.
Oh. Okay.
And I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Oh.
And so when I changed my behavior, that actually improved my battery life. Is that what I do now is that, if it's between, if it's around 20 or up around 80 is where I'll let it discharge to or charge.
Yep.
And then Apple also added this feature in a recent update that manages the battery charging a little better.
A little better, yeah. Yeah. Cool.
That's what I do right now. I think last I looked at my MacBook, I think it's at like 88%. It was 90 when we talked about this last. So
okay.
So it's working for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right, you want to take us to Robbie, John?
Yes. Where are we, Robbie? Where is he? Hold on. There he is.
Got him. All
okay.
Right.
Is it possible to update/change the username on my account? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Though you got to dig kind of deep, but what you want to do is you want to go to System Preferences, Users and Groups, and then you'll see a little lock, and you want to unlock the lock. Once you unlock the lock, right-click on your user, and you'll see Advanced Options, ... Well, click on that, and you will see a whole bunch of fields that you can change. And there's one called Full Name. Well, change that to whatever you want, and that'll do it for you. Be careful though, because you can screw things up majorly if you change the wrong things in this box. And they even say, warning, changing these settings might damage this account and prevent the user from logging in. So just keep that in mind.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm looking at this, and if it logged into my Dave Hamilton account on my iMac here, there's the big warning that says changing these settings might damage this account and prevent the user from logging in. Yep. Okay, good. What I find interesting is I can change everything on this list. And there are some scary things here. You can change your user ID. I would not recommend that unless you know exactly what you're doing. You can change the group, change your full name, as you pointed out, your login shell. That's interesting. I didn't realize I could change my shell here. I usually do that from the terminal. That's good. Your home directory, again, choose wisely, but you can do it. And then there's some aliases, and I'm not entirely sure what those are, and I wouldn't mess with them until I was. You can change the Apple ID associated with an account. The one thing that I can't change to the account with which I am currently logged in is my short account name. Right.
Yeah, it's grayed out.
However, if I look at the other users on this machine and I do the same thing and go to Advanced Options, I can change the account name. Now, by default, the short name, the account name, is the same as the home folder name. So, if the account name is Dave, for example, all lowercase, the home directory would be /users/Dave. I can change the account name of another user, but that doesn't change their home directory name. And I could change their home directory name, but I would have to be very careful to keep that in sync and all of that stuff. So it is possible to change all of it, but proceed with caution. Heed that warning at the top of the page very carefully. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize you could change the short name of a user. But I
think it's grayed out because it's the admin user.
I think because you're logged in. I think that's what it is.
You're logged in. Yeah. Probably best not. Though you can. Though I was able to. I was able to change the full name, and I didn't have to restart. So the kind of.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, I changed it and then went to the went to the lock screen and then typed in the new name, or actually it pre-populated it with the newer name.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. So. Huh. All right. Well, that's how it goes. Yeah. Fascinating. All right. Good. Okay. All right. Well, that one we actually got there. I like it. And in the chat room, Brian Monroe says, this is, you can change your username, but it doesn't change the home folder name associated with it. Right. You'd have to do that separately and manually. Yeah. But yeah, this is one of those things where it's helpful to have a test user that is an admin or some other alternative user on your Mac, not just for confirming things and troubleshooting, but also for this kind of stuff. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, cool, fun. All right, I think we've got one more Geek Challenge, and then we've got some Wi-Fi stuff to dig into, and thankfully we have time to do that, which I'm stoked about. So, but let's go. I don't know that we're gonna. This one, I believe, John, is going to be a true Geek Challenge. But let's see. Steven asks, my wife has a work iPhone that she doesn't always want to lug around, but she also doesn't want to miss calls or texts to. Is there a way to receive a notification on her other iPhone for when her work phone receives a call or text? And man, I don't we're talking about wanting push notifications from one device to another. Very specific ones, though, for text and calls. Unfortunately, third-party apps don't get to know when you've received a text or a call. So it's not like you could have some app running. I feel like, all right, so here's my crazy idea, John. Bear with me on this. I don't think her people at work are going to be happy about this idea, but I'm going to send it out there anyway. You could take the phone number from that phone and make it into a Google Voice number. Okay. And you can convert a cell phone to a Google Voice. I think it costs $20 and it's a one-time fee, and then you're done. So you convert the Google Voice, the cell phone number to a Google Voice number, and then you have it point to whatever the new number is that you're going to get for that phone. And you're going to keep that number very private, right? Because you don't want anybody to know it, because otherwise you'd have to do this again. And then you have it, forward text messages to that phone and forward phone calls to that phone, so that phone now functions essentially as it would. You need to be very careful when you're making calls out that you do it using the Google Voice app and not the phone app, because otherwise you'd be exposing your number. I guess you could make your number not show up in caller ID, and then so that problem solved. Okay, so Google Voice, forwarding, and hide your number from caller ID so that no one accidentally gets it. But you got to use the Google Voice app for your text messages, not your main phone. So maybe don't even have them, don't have it forward text messages, just have it forward calls. And then you get your text messages via notification in the Google Voice app. Well, here's the fun part. You can log into the Google Voice app on both phones. So that would get you there, and you can see when a call comes in, it like the Google Voice app says you're getting a call. So I think that's that. There's some comments in the chat room that I'll parse through, John, unless you've already parsed through them. But do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, my thought was pretty much what you indicated is, so do some sort of forwarding.
Yeah.
And your cell phone provider may do that as well. And
yep.
Actually, some people have suggested that in our chat room here.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, right. Warren in the chat room says, could use something called Digits from T-Mobile for a work phone number and use the app. Interesting. Right. Yes. Different carriers do different things. I like this. Yeah. Right. Because you can have, as a Verizon user, John, you were able to have text messages forwarded to something else, right? While you were traveling once or something. I remember you saying that. Yeah. No.
Oh, no, this was different. Yeah, I traveled to France a number of years ago.
Okay.
And actually, their solution, so because they were CDMA, that wasn't supported in France.
Right.
So, but what they did is they would lend me another phone that my number was forwarded to.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, of course, the current iPhone should work just fine when I'm in Europe.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're willing to pay your provider, whoever that is, right? Like, yeah, they're functionally, technically, absolutely. Yes, that's right. Yep. All right. Well, that's fun. Good. All right, John. I do want to go to the Wi-Fi stuff, but I also want to talk about our sponsors, if that works for you, my friend.
Awesome.
All right. Look, you hear me talk about Linode all the time because at linode.com/MGG, you can get a $20 credit to get started with their amazing servers and infrastructure. So I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction today. What if you want to set up a WordPress server? Think about that. What would you do? You would have to figure out where to host it, how to install it, all of that stuff. You might go and ask your favorite nerd, right? Because that's what we do here. So that makes sense. Well, you can skip all those steps because you're really not skipping anything. Linode's just taking care of it for you. You go to linode.com/MGG, you sign up. You don't even have to put a credit card in because you've got that free $20 credit. And you just tell Linode's Cloud Manager you want to spin up a WordPress server. And then that's it. Now you've got a WordPress server. And you could do it on their $5 a month Nanode server. And you could do that for 4 months with your $20 credit. So what are you waiting for? Go. Linode.com/MGG. Spin up your first server. Our thanks to Linode for sponsoring this episode. All right, look, with everything that's going on here, a lot of us, me included, I've talked about it on the show, are feeling anxious or stressed or depressed. I've been experiencing re-entry anxiety, very different thing for me. And it's good to have somebody to talk to, but it can be hard finding a doctor to talk to, especially now. And that's why I'm really excited about our next sponsor, PlushCare, because PlushCare knows that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. And their primary care physicians are here for you 7 days a week to help you start feeling better as soon as possible. And it's all telehealth. And you can get same-day appointments. This is pretty good. In addition to being primary care physicians who handle ongoing and urgent care, they also treat a wide range of common mental health issues like anxiety, depression, stress, or even trouble sleeping. They'll discuss treatment options with you, and they can even, because they're doctors, they can have your prescription sent to your local pharmacy as needed. PlushCare accepts most major insurance carriers and is available in all 50 states. So, PlushCare makes it easier than ever to take care of yourself inside and out. You can start your membership today by going to plushcare.com/MGG, where you can start your free 30-day trial. That's PlushCare, PlushCare.com/MGG for a free 30-day trial. PlushCare.com/MGG. Our thanks to PlushCare for doing what they're doing and also for sponsoring this episode. I have another way that I help remove my stress, and that's by using TextExpander, because you get started at textexpander.com/podcast. And man, this is where you're going to get a tool that is going to change the way you do your work. I always say I really prioritize accuracy. And I also prioritize efficiency. Sometimes those two things fight each other because, usually in order to be accurate, you have to take extra time and vice versa, right? Inverse is better than the square of the roots. And now with TextExpander, you can do both. Because the way TextExpander works, you're taking all of those things that you type over and over again, and you put them into TextExpander so that you're not digging through your sent folder, finding when was the last time I emailed this thing, or what was that thing I said? I like that magic phrase I came up with. Put your magic phrases into TextExpander, and then you can invoke them with a click of your mouse, or you type a little short snippet that expands into your larger magic phrase or even magic document. Way better than copy and paste. Better than scripts and templates. TextExpander allows you to maximize your time by getting rid of the repetitive things you type while still customizing and personalizing your messages. Check it out. TextExpander.com/podcast and increase your productivity today. Listeners to this show get 20% off their first year, which is awesome. So thanks to TextExpander for that, and thanks for sponsoring this episode. John, while we were in the doing the ads here, Eric DSA came up with an answer for Steven's question about his wife with the two phones. And I like this because it keeps things tidy. Assuming that it's an iPhone that she has for work, get an Apple Watch, marry that to the iPhone, and now that Apple Watch will get text messages and phone calls from the work iPhone, even when the work iPhone isn't right there. Now, it means that you can't sync that with your personal phone. Like, you can only have your phone sync to one Apple Watch, or your Apple Watch doesn't sync to one phone more relevantly. But that would be interesting. So I like that. I like it. I don't know. What do you think? Sure. Yeah. All right, cool. I promised Wi-Fi, so let's dig in and talk Wi-Fi a little bit here. We'll start with James because we've got, networking and Wi-Fi is what we have today. And he says, my girlfriend and I are moving to a new condo soon, and I'm looking to outfit the new place with several HomeKit devices in a reliable config. At our previous 950 square foot place, we had an Ecobee thermostat, a bunch of Lutron smart switches, a bunch of Hue bulbs, a couple of home pods, all connected to a single Linksys Velop node. So it's a mesh system, but they just had one node of it because that's all they needed for the size of their place. And he said, it was configured with the same SSID as most meshes are for both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and a Comcast connection at 300 down and 12 up. The problems with that setup, the Lutron switches all needed to be reset every few months, and 2 eventually stopped controlling the lights at all. HomeKit's commands were received by the switch. The LED on the switch changed state and the switch clicked, but the lights didn't turn on. Interesting. Okay, the Ecobee thermostat also eventually stopped responding as far as HomeKit was concerned. HomeKit control was regained a couple of times after resetting the device, but eventually we treated it as a normal thermostat, operating it only from the unit. Oh, like savages. The Apple TV in particular, and other devices less often, despite all being within 20 to 30 feet of the router or access point, would attain slower than desired speeds, even while the directly connected Velop would see full advertised speeds. So the new place is bigger, 1,100 square feet, and there will be more switches, maybe 3 times the number of switches. There will be another thermostat, and he says we're fine replacing the thermostats with any type of HomeKit option. Doesn't have to be Ecobee. There will be a higher network demand with both my girlfriend and I now working from home indefinitely. Of course, the Cox connection there will be 500 down and 10 up. So the questions are, should I configure the Velop router differently to better support the 2.4 gigahertz HomeKit devices? Is there another router system I should get, Orbi, Plume, which would better serve the many varied devices? Any opinion on HomeKit thermostats? I don't love the Ecobee in terms of aesthetics, he says, and certainly its high maintenance, in our experience, does nothing to further that recommendation. He says, is there an appreciable difference between a direct Ethernet connection to the main router of a mesh system and a direct connection to one of its nodes? Okay. So I want to there's a couple of things I want to dive into here, John. The first is that your HomeKit issues seem to be pretty par for the course from my standpoint. And they're pretty par for the course for any of the smart home platforms with just HomeKit, the Amazon thing, smart things. In some scenarios, things just don't stay connected and need a few reconnects per year. This has certainly been my experience with some things. And from reading it, it sounds like your Lutron problems weren't HomeKit at all. If the switch was changing state, HomeKit did its job, right? Rather just some Lutron problem, maybe a firmware update, So I don't know about that, but we'll keep digging here. So we have two ecobee thermostats here, one old one that is not natively HomeKit and one of the Gen 3 ones that is natively HomeKit. We use Homebridge or some other solution, depending on the day, to link the older one to HomeKit. And that's been pretty flawless, knock on wood, which is sort of crazy. But I don't change settings on my thermostats all that often, but I really haven't had problems with being connected to them. It's interesting. You said it wasn't working with HomeKit. Was it working with ecobee's app? Because that would explain whether it was a HomeKit problem or a problem with your thermostat connecting to your Wi-Fi network, right? Because those are, they're the same, but they're different. So it would be good to sort of isolate that out and see, is your ecobee thermostat just not like losing its complete Wi-Fi connection? Because the ecobee app should be able to control it, even if whatever smart home platform you're using, including HomeKit, cannot. So that would be another one to check out. As far as other HomeKit thermostats, I know Honeywell's got one. Nest is not natively HomeKit compatible, though we've talked about a couple of solutions, including Homebridge on the show here, that can make them sort of bridge them to being HomeKit. Depending on where you live, my thoughts on Nest versus ecobee. If you're living in a place where it gets cold enough to freeze, I think ecobee is a better solution than Nest, because Nest tries to outsmart you, and you probably already know what your schedule is and therefore can manage your own heat and save yourself a lot of money. Wi-Fi, it's unclear whether there are issues. But I will say, in general, what you're seeing is not atypical in that this smart home stuff, some of it truly is still, kind of bleeding edge. The Velop unit and units have proved to be some of the word I want to use is dumb mesh systems, in that they don't have a lot of smarts and basically leave everything up to the clients. And this is not from reverse engineering their stuff, so I could be completely wrong. This is an experiential evaluation that it seems like there is no hinting coming from them to shift things from 2.4 to 5 or from one mesh point to another. It doesn't look like any of that is happening. The smarts that we see with systems from like Eero and Plume really kind of leads the charge with the smarts part of it, and aggressively managing devices yet in an appropriate way. I have not experienced that at all with developed systems. It's basically, here's the network, client devices, you decide, and we're good to go. So, but you only had one Velop point. So really, I don't prefer the Velop system because it doesn't do any of that stuff. That said, some systems that try and fail to do that stuff are worse, because if they don't get it right, now your devices simply can't stay connected. So bear that in mind. But Velop it's just not at the top of my list, because it's to me a very sort of, like I said, dumb in that it doesn't have all the smarts mesh system. And it hasn't been that long. It's maybe 6 months since I've dug in. So I doubt things have changed, but they totally might have. I'm not sure, depending on the layout of your apartments, I'm not sure that you even need a mesh system. You might be best served with a, very powerful router, like a 4x4 style router, that can, serve everything. Those 4x4 routers tend to the mesh systems usually are not 4x4. Some of the Orbis, I'm sorry, are, but not necessarily in the way that you would need them to be. I would see if you can live with one mesh or one router and just make it a powerful one. So I don't know. Those are some of my thoughts, John. What do you think?
First off, as far as reliability, I would disagree. I have never had a device fall off my smart home network because I use SmartThings and Z-Wave. So,
okay.
So I would disagree. Or that has not been my experience.
Sure.
And
sure.
that my devices have never. I always see them when
that doesn't surprise. Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. Your house is fairly like compact in that regard. So you're not like the Z-Wave devices will create their own mesh. And I've seen it here with SmartThings where it's like the ones that are, like in between, like, because we've got a spread out setup here and it like some light bulbs just fall off and it's like, oh yeah. We got to power cycle it. Well, cause it's, it's trying to do its own meshing and there's other things in the way and things like that. So, I mean, yes, it's not true of 100% of the scenarios, but it is true of 100% of the mesh system, of the smart home systems in certain scenarios. And it's possible in his apartment that, he was having tons of Wi-Fi interference from all of his neighbors. I just set up for my daughter's off-campus apartment for school. I just went in and the Wi-Fi service that they were getting from Xfinity was terrible. I mean, if you Ethernet it in, you got your 300 down and 10 up, which is or 12 up, whatever it is, whatever they're supposed to get. But the way that it was, even with the Xfinity X5 box or whatever, like at best they were getting maybe 50 megabits per second right next to the router. And of course I looked, and it was like, this is terrible. Well, I set them up with the Netgear C7800, which is the cable modem. It's called the Nighthawk X4S DOCSIS 3.1 ultra high speed cable modem and router. It's a 4x4 dual band router with a DOCSIS 3.1 cable modem built into it. So we were able to save them the rental fees on their router and their cable modem. But it's great. It does its own survey of the local network like congestion and shows you how many networks are on each channel. And it's actually got a really nice graph. So you could say, we easily said, move 2.4 to channel 1, move the 5 gigahertz to whatever channel, I don't know, I forget what we picked, 136 or something. And immediately it was like, oh, now you're getting 250 megabits per second on Wi-Fi. And it was like, okay, now we're in business. Now, it doesn't mean that that's not going to have to change when everybody else moves in at the end of August and sets up their Wi-Fi. I really feel like there should be an apartment manager that is, network manager that says, okay, you set up your stuff on channels, 1 and 36. You set up yours on this and just balance it out because it's totally doable, as anyone that's set up like an office building knows. But when you're uncoordinated, it's a mess. So anyway, that's, neither here nor there. Well, it's actually there. But anyway.
Yeah, as far as coverage, I'm probably so my place is 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
And I have 4 Eeros. Covering it, and I think that's overkill. But
yes, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
As far as frequency selection, sometimes I'll look at what the Eero sees, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's 2.4. It connected at 2.4 gigahertz. I've never had an issue with any of my smart home things. And yeah, most, I guess, for cost
Eero's
reasons.
pretty good with it in terms of managing the smart home things. Yeah, no, that's totally true. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like, hey, you want to be on 2.4? Okay, sure.
Right.
So I've never had an issue with something not being able to connect to my Wi-Fi because, it got confused about the frequency.
Totally. Yeah. Yep. That's good. Yeah, that is a common problem with smart home stuff, especially with mesh systems where you've got the same SSID It can, especially if you're equidistant. I noticed an interesting feature in the TP-Link Deco app, which I've got set up for some of my relatives over in Maine. I was just in there the other day because I like to. That's why I have it set up for them. I like to see how does it? What features have they added? What is it doing? And you can tell you can go into each connected device and turn off meshing on it, which means it won't encourage it nor let it move to another mesh point, which is great. I guess it would let it, but it won't encourage it with like 802.11r or whatever that is. So it's not going to do that crazy thing where it bounces around. And that can be super helpful if you've got something where you're like, yep, nope, this is connected to the right thing and it's in a fixed spot. So please don't. And you can just turn it off for that one and it won't send any hints to that one, but it'll keep doing it for the rest, which I really kind of liked. I thought that was pretty good. I think Plume and Eero are doing something similar, but they're doing it in an automatic way. They're profiling the device and saying, okay, look, that's a television or that's a thermostat. Do not tell it to jump to different things. Like that doesn't make any sense. Leave it right where it is because it's not moving around the house. Find the best one and let it find the best one and just let it do its thing. And my guess is it's doing that with other smart home stuff too. So yeah, I don't know. Fun stuff, Mr. Braun. Fun stuff.
Yeah. And as far as I'm also with you on the router, as you could probably get away with, it's been a while since I had a standalone. The last standalone one I had was the, TP-Link Archer C7, which at one point was a pick of a Wirecutter or somebody like that. And it did great.
No, I agree. Those do great. Yeah. They'd still be, as far as like relatively inexpensive standalone routers, I like the TP-Link Archers. I mean, they don't quite have the features of like the Synology RT2600, right? But if you don't need those, then why go out of your way for them? So yeah, no, I like that. Yep. So I would say that for that size place, again, depending on how many devices you're going to have truly active and stuff, you might be best served with a single, if you can be centralized, especially a single very powerful 4x4 router like the Synology RT2600. That might be your best option. It's every place is different. It's hard to give universal advice, but yeah, sizing wise, that might do it for you. It depends. But if the walls have plaster in them, well then no, you're going to need maybe more mesh points than John. So, yeah, just depends. All right. Fun. Okay. Let's go to Mace here, who asks, we will soon be finishing our basement. What should we use if I want to put Ethernet in? Any overall best practices? So these days, John, I think it's either Cat 6A or Cat 7 Ethernet that's recommended in homes. And I'll put a link to an article that has a great chart in it that kind of shows what things can do, right? So Cat 6 is capable of doing either gigabit or 10 gigabit Ethernet, and the distance dictates it. So 50 meters, you get 10 gig, 100 meters, 50 to 100 meters, you get 1 gig Ethernet. Cat 7 will do 10 gig for all 100 meters. So, if it were me, I'd probably do Cat 7. There is Cat 8 out there, but that's rated up to 25 gigs and even 40 gigs, depending on how you're doing things. Like it's expensive overkill is what that turns out to be. So I think 10 gig would, Cat 7 would be the way to go. I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Braun?
Yeah, I suppose all of my cables are 5E, which is fine for gigabit.
Okay, yeah.
If you're
totally. Yeah.
But if I had to do it now, I would assume that my network will migrate to a 10 gig. So yeah, I would get more expensive.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, I've run 10 gig on Cat5e cables before. It works sometimes.
For a short distance, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not rated for it. And don't be surprised when it doesn't work the way you want, but it can work. It's just like you said. Yeah. So, all right. We kind of went through this, but Mark asks, related to the question that we just answered for James. He says, I purchased the Orbi 6 as I needed a fast connection in my basement for work, and getting Ethernet from the second floor where the Comcast router is wasn't an easily doable task. The Orbi satellite has 2 Ethernet connections, one of which I put into a Cisco switch for my 3 computers and a printer. I thought purchasing a Wi-Fi 6 device would give me a few years before I had to upgrade. I was moving from my bedroom office where my Comcast router is into my basement, which is more spacious than the bedroom. Now, the interesting part. I configured my Orbi to have the same SSID as my Comcast SSID. Then I changed my Comcast SSID and set it not to broadcast. Okay. Everything was restarted. My connection tests using the Orbi were smoking fast. My Nest thermostat went offline a few days after and continued to go offline every day or so. After charging the Nest and then resetting it several times, I changed my Orbi and Comcast SSID back to their original settings. And after changing them back, the Nest on Comcast Wi-Fi and Orbi on its own, I had no Nest issues over the past week. So, did having the Orbi in router mode drain the Nest? An Orbi satellite was less than 15 feet from the Nest. Should the Orbi or Comcast have been in bridge mode? Should I have had the Comcast and Orbi on the same SSID? I don't want to change the name of the network, as family know it and several household devices are already configured with that name. The Orbi can't be returned as I threw away the box after the initial changes seemed to be okay, and I still need the basement connection. Okay. So a couple of solutions here. It sounds like you're running into that issue where your Nest thermostat is jumping between 2 mesh points and can't decide where it is, and therefore burning out its battery faster than it should. So one thing to do would be I totally get that you don't want to, that you want to have an SSID for your house regardless of what network is broadcasting it. No problem. So do that, set your Orbi to that one. Then I would go through and do that. And then I would turn off the Wi-Fi. Don't just have it hide the SSID on your Comcast thing, on your Comcast router. I would turn, make it not broadcast Wi-Fi at all. Turn the radios off. This is possible on most of those. So do that. And then reconfigure your Nest. I know your Nest already knows about the SSID and all of that. It's possible, and I don't know this, but it's possible that it's caching the MAC address of the access point to which it was connecting, aka your Comcast router. And if it's seeing that, it may simply be trying to connect to that one and not able to because the SSID and password are now different. And that may be what's going on. So kill that. Make your Orbis the only thing that broadcast, and then go through the setup process of your Nest again and reattach it to, your existing Wi-Fi network. I think that's going to help you here because it's going to get the Nest set up with, okay, this is the device to which I am connecting. A lot of I know we don't think about it this way, but all our devices choose a MAC address to connect to. The SSID just makes it easy to find that. And also it allows for all of this meshing and roaming to happen because it knows, I should connect to other ones as it moves around. A lot of smart home devices get themselves fixated on a MAC address, not on an SSID. And that may be where you are. That may be what's going wrong here. So once that MAC address is no longer broadcasting, then go through the process. So that's my thoughts on this. I don't know. What do you think, John?
The next door community that I was telling you about before, most of the success stories are people not using just like you suggested here, is people turning off the Wi-Fi in the provided one and doing your own.
Okay, so that's how they're solving them, is killing off the, okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, the conclusion is that, the cable modem part of it is okay, but the Wi-Fi part, you probably want to do your own thing.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. We had a very similar question from Steven. This is an issue, and Steven's also using the Orbi, who it sounds like it's bouncing between two devices. And the Orbi is another one of those mesh systems that doesn't quite have the same level of device specific, like client device specific smarts, like the Plume and the Eero do. And so it doesn't surprise me that you're running into issues, that many of you are running into issues like this. If you can turn off 802.11r or seamless roaming, or fast roaming, rather, is often what it's called. And I don't know if Orbi gives you this option, but if you can turn off fast roaming, 802.11r is what the protocol is, that can help for sure. Another thing that you could do, and I know this stinks to think about, is if you need to use the Orbi, in a scenario like this, and it's doing fine and getting your devices what you need, try going into the Orbi web interface. I'll put a link to this because you might be able to set a different SSID on the 2.4 gigahertz band. I know this was possible with earlier versions of the Orbi firmware. I think it's still possible. And if you split that out and set one of the mesh points, specifically the one that's closest to your, whatever IoT device or devices are having problems, set the 2.4 gigahertz network to a different network name. That can help. But again, Plume and Eero, because they're doing those sort of cloud-based smarts where they know, okay, with this particular device, this is how we have to treat it, and treating each device, profiling the type of device and applying that profile, they tend not to have these problems. And it makes a difference. Of course, it's cloud managed, and some people don't like that, and I totally get that. But this is where this is why things like Unify from Ubiquiti exist, because you can set different profiles specifically for different devices. You can really get in there, and of course, you can get yourself into huge trouble by changing all that stuff. But at the same time, you get yourself what you want. So. But try the Orbi web interface. That might do it. And Brian Monroe in the chat room, thank you, says that yes, there is a setting for fast roaming on the Orbi. Try turning that off. That may well solve your problems. What fast roaming brings us, though, is the ability to be on a VoIP call and walk around the house and have it not lose the VoIP call as often, because it's doing that quick handoff from device to device, or from access point to access point. So I don't know. What do you think, man? Anything that you've got for this one?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, I feel like we are very, very close to the end here. You know what? Let's let Louis share a solution to a question that we had back in 825.
Hey guys, I was just listening to the podcast and was a little disturbed by John's comment about receiving a screen sharing request from AppleCare. I've been using the screen sharing capability lately with my clients. I've normally used dedicated apps like Splashtop or LogMe or such, but find that the messages route is just so damn simple, and that scares me a little bit. Really, all you need to know is the person's iCloud address or phone number to send a request to share their screen. Who's to say that I couldn't just change my username or my messages account name to AppleCare and send a random screen sharing request to John, knowing his phone number or one of his email addresses? Just seems a little too simple. Wonder what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. It sounds like Lewis maybe pulled his car over to leave us that message, and lots of people were passing him. But his point is totally valid, that you don't know that it was AppleCare that was trying to share your screen the other day, right? That was just somebody that knew your iCloud.
That's what it
address.
said.
Right.
But I recall the dialogue coming up when I was on the phone with them doing AppleCare.
Yes.
In the past.
Of course. Yeah.
But it could have been fake. Yeah, you're right.
I know. It's pretty interesting that yes, it doesn't show you who it just shows you the name. I was going to say you could try and text them back, but there's no way there. Yeah. Interesting. I like the thought process there. So all right. Well, I think that's going to have to do it for this one, Mr. Braun. Unless you've got anything else to share here.
That mysterious value you were talking about before. Just a mini tip here, but if you go to your airport menu and you hold down Option and you click on it, there's something. I think you were this value you were talking about is the BSSID,
the MAC address of the base station. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So Option and holding and clicking on the airport menu will show you the BSSID of whatever you're talking to. So
yeah,
if you want to dig in,
that
shows you a bunch of other good stuff too.
Yeah, that is a handy thing. I forgot that was there. That's definitely yeah. I like it. I like it. What am I doing here? How come I can't find any of the things I want to find? All right. Well, it's time to wind us out of here, my friend. Hey, look, I found the band. It's good. We try to find the band. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. This is one of our favorite things that we get to do, and we're very thankful that we get to do it for all of you. And I do want to take a minute and thank all of our premium subscribers whose payments, contributions have come in. MacGeekGab.com/premium if you want to learn about that. This is not a mandatory thing. I know I say that all the time, but I find that important. This is completely voluntary. It does make a huge difference for us, but you do not need to be a premium subscriber to listen. Listening is the best thing you can do. Sending in your questions, your tips, your cool stuff found, awesome. Telling other people about the show, awesome. Helping us by simply visiting our sponsors, awesome. Whether you buy is between you and them, but please, check them out and see if they've got something that makes sense for you. And then obviously, all of you who are interested in and can contribute to the premium program makes a huge difference as well. So with that, I want to thank Abdullah from Reisterstown, Greg from Los Angeles, Nick from Mount Clemens, Ron, we don't have an address for Ron, Ari from Kensington, Deb from San Clemente, Anthony with no address, Doug from North York, Michael from Mission Hills, Philip from Tucson, Tim from Des Moines, Graham from Yelverton, James from Brandon, Robert from Oklahoma City, Bob from La Peche, Timothy from West Windsor, and Timothy from Hendersonville, Jay Walter from Long Island City, Jim from San Jose, Santiago from Palm City, Chris from Chorleywood, John from Wake Forest, Lee from Baton Rouge, Ken from Honolulu, George from Lightwater, Michael from Robbins, Mark from Panama City, Dave from Saugerties, Racer, and we don't know where you're from, and that's okay, Matthew from Forked River, David from Mount Prospect, Scott from Bourbonnais, Clive from Burgess Hill, Tony, Frank from Tunbridge, David from Plainsboro, Jeff from Chesterton, Michael, James from Melville, Joseph from Marietta, Michael from Rochester, Barry from, maybe you're traveling again, it's possible. Wouldn't surprise me. So be safe wherever you are, my friend. Scott from Calabasas, Robert from Columbiana, Stephen from Plainfield, Mark, Brett from Pembroke Pines, easy for you to say, Ralph from Attleboro, Tim from Bright, William from Hebron, Dionisio from Oakland, Joseph from Shorewood, Dan, and James from Chester. Thanks to all of you. You rock. That's what I got today, John. What, you got anything to tell them? Anything, places to find us? Anything like that? Anything you want to share?
there's always the Twitters. I'm
Okay.
John F. Braun. He's Dave Hamilton. There's Pilot Pete. There's Mac Geek Gab. And there's Mac Observer, all on Twitter.
Thanks so much, folks. We will see you next time. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors. You can visit all of them at macgeekgab.com/sponsors. And, of course, from this episode, linode.com/MGG, plushcare.com/MGG, textexpander.com/podcast. Of course, our ongoing sponsors, eero.com/MGG, linode.com. Oh, we said linode.com. They were in the episode. Barebones.com. Otherworld Computing, macsales.com. All right, John, I got us into this. You got to get us out of this, man. What lasting advice do you have? Anything to share?
The only way I can think of getting us out of this, Dave, is to offer people some good advice, and that's don't get caught.
Made on a Mac.
All right. Well, you got one less breath clearing in throat clearing in before we got out. So, yep. All right. Thanks, everybody, for